And I think it's already. Okay. And then the second thing is, of course, fashion. So I have loved this artist for many years, and her name is Lauren Birch. And one of the reasons I love it is because, well, dogs, because I'm a dog person, but also because she had this, she's no longer with us, she had this illness called osteopetrosis. And what that was her bones were so brittle they were breaking down inside of her body. So it kind of reminds me, like right now, there's something called kintsugi that's really popular. It's a Japanese art form where, like, if you break something and then you highlight it with gold, and we're all talking about being broken and all that kind of stuff. But she started doing her art because she was in so much pain, and she got her diagnosis when she was a kid. So yeah, and her stuff is still out there. So I think I have, there's my list.
It looks really cool with this art too. It looks really cool with the art on the wall.
I planned it. No, I didn't. I had no clue. So I'm really happy to be here. And I have, I think, 14 poems. And the first one is called Time Capsule. And there are references in here to some poets. And if you saw this on the page, they're in italics, right? Or like when my book someday finally gets published, they would have little notes in the back of the book saying, like, this is attributed to so-and-so. So Rumi, a guy named John Masefield, Sandberg, Langston Hughes, Eve Marion, and John Ciardi, who wrote this book called How Does a Poem Mean? I have to get out my show and tell. He wrote this book called How Does a Poem Mean, which is about sound and meaning in poetry. And this was back in like the 50s, I think, but I got it. It was the second like major book that I bought about poetry in my life. And the first one was the Arrow Book of Poetry, which I bought when I was in 3rd grade. And I still have it. And so the poem is kind of based on this. Here we go. Time Capsule. Judge a book by its cover? She may have. For the Arrow Book of Poetries bore a decoupage of trees as though Matisse had entered her 3rd grade classroom, tore up brown construction paper for branches, cut domes of red, green, and golden brown for their crowns to peek from the book's edge, then called on Monet to lay down bands of green and brown sky, perhaps, or more like the river where, light years later, she'd take the dog swimming. I can guess, for I was that nearsighted girl in a watch-plaid jumper who sat up front in Mrs. Johnson's room at St. Mark's, who not only loved trees and the sky and rivers, but also loved to read. Heard the poet's voice say, I cannot speak until you come, and so filled out the book order in my weekly reader. My early comforts curated here in an unintended time capsule, a slim volume, not even 100 pages, pages the color of lightly toasted white bread. I turned them tenderly, minding the age of this singular artifact, treasure not exactly buried among books on the shelf, this unexamined and tangible relic, a link to the quiet girl I was, who turned inward at 9. Basho, Joyce, Yeats, Millay, Cummings, Sandberg, Langston, Frost, Merriam, 9 pages circled in that signature way I recognize as my own marginalia. She reveals me to me. 9 pages in which I'm clearly drawn to poetry's music, the rhyming couples of sea fever jauntily rocking in If All the Sea Were One, while Ciardi offers my first glimpse of his How Does a Poem Mean, in the swaying sashaying of a high-flying sky day, a fine cat, a fine fat catbird on a stump by a highway a cat heard. Did the lonely sea offer solace for this middle child and surrogate parent, lost among eight brothers and sisters, consoling others before herself, or, as in Cummings' Chanson Innocence, did a Christmas tree remind her to keep the duty to do so? I will comfort you because you smell so sweetly. Though she fought to be a child. My little sister and I will take hands, and looking up at our beautiful tree, will dance and sing. I think she smiled at the pictures in her mind when fog came on little cat feet, and maybe longed for something she didn't yet call beauty, someone she had no name for yet, kissing the ground, when she imagined the rain could kiss you, and the rain might beat upon her head with silver liquid drops. And I think she wanted this and more, and thought he was talking to her, when Frost said, "You come too." Okay. And sorry for butchering the French. Not very good at French. Spanish, Italian, yes. Okay. This is a poem that I'd been wanting to write for a long time, and so my friend George Longenecker texted me today, and he said I should read something about hunger. And I said, well, I don't have anything literally about hunger, but this has a little bit about hunger in it in a kind of slanty way. And there's also a reference to something called Sunbonnet Sue, which is a pattern for making a quilt. It's a certain kind of figure. She almost looks like she's got like a cap, like a covered hoodie cap on. And I think that's all you need to know. Meditation upon Degas' Woman Ironing at the National Gallery of Art. At first, my gaze is external. A woman ironing. A bowl of water to dampen the shirt as she glides the iron across the fabric, her face concentrated downward. For Degas made a study of women's work, the laundresses, washerwomen, hat makers, as meticulous as their work. Isn't the face of Degas' woman also my mother's? Nearly a century later, standing at the ironing board all day and into the night, encouraging me, her fourth child, to be born through gravity on that Midwestern winter morning. Was my hesitation to enter the world born from an intimation she'd too soon retreat into religiosity, abandoning me to find my own way? I remember sitting on her lap, the warmth of her body, the soft purr of her voice, my hunger for story, the feeling that I was the only thing that mattered. Then the rupture. Once she took a yardstick to the back of my thighs. I railed against her a long time. Then one day she was sewing a quilt, Sunbonnet Sue, using remnants from 3 dresses her mother bought her after her father had beaten her. I saw she had chapters too. Standing here before the master's painting, filtered light spilling in from its 3 large windows, bright with the rosy pink of her freshly pressed shirt falling onto the woman's apron. I saw the whole of it, her story and mine. Okay. I'm the person, like, when I go to, like, find a card, like a Hallmark card, I start crying, so I'll try not to. Give and take. In this poem, there's a reference to, like, ultraviolet light, and I read this really interesting science thing that, like, I kind of always thought that bees just went to the flowers, but that's not true. What happens is that there's like an ultraviolet light that the flowers give off, so the bees can see their colors and their lines. And I just thought that was amazing. Give and take. In spring, we applaud the flower dreaming itself into being, thrumming below the surface, pumping sugar, magically glistening, even before the bee arrives at flower's nectar to celebrate possibility, murmuring, could be, could be, could be. But it's the lure of the ultraviolet light, unseen by others, that draws the bee to the flower's lines and color. In autumn, brilliant red staghorn sumac's heart hums bass, ba-boom, ba-boom, and flames in the late summer sun. Now nature's more declarative than interrogative, showily giving way to what's below the surface. Atoms arranging into a new consciousness. No matter the season, aren't we always being asked to release what's no longer serves us? I seem to have a lot of mother poems, and I have a couple of father ones, but I brought them, but I don't think I'll read them. I don't know. Anyway, this poem I wrote because I've had this long-standing sort of contention with my mother that she's all about religion and prayer, and she's not very accessible emotionally. So when I first wrote it, it was sort of like out of that space of anger. And I sent it to her, and she really liked it, and she thought it gave me a different take on it. She just saw it as how she was important in my life, I think. So somewhere in here, it mentions 4 kinds of prayers, which are blessing, forgiveness, which is also called contrition, thanksgiving, and petition. And I was raised Catholic, and so I think, if I understand it correctly, even though I don't practice anymore, specifically, those are ways to look at prayer. And it's called My Mother is a Prayer. She sits in her chair, fingering her rosary beads, or sometimes with prayer book in hand. Praying is her habit. So much so that she's become the thing itself, verbing towards God, whose name is I Am. I know this because the Easter I was 11, it snowed, and because of her devotion, I wore a pale yellow cape, the color of Coreopsis. She sewed for me, as though I were her only child, not the 4th in line of 9, not surrogate parent, not one of her brood, though I wasn't. Perhaps time stood still just for a moment, that Sunday morning on our way to St. Mark's for Easter Mass. Because she guided the fabric with care through the presser foot, letting the feed dogs move the cloth along, using threads of quiet or adoration, I was made of one piece. At last, I was Mary Rose. I bloomed. Her work was her blessing. Should the filament tangle in the needle, then she would simply shift, soften into contrition, reset the bobbin, adjust the tension, for a mother of 9 must have known what it was to be stretched tight. In the backyard, Forsythia was yearning to open its yellow blossoms, singing its welcome hallelujahs to the new season, but I was adorned in a cape of gentler yellow, Asia's Coreopsis rendered with grace. In grace, the third thread of prayer. In this garment, cape and skirt of soft yellow and gray-brown plaid, like the bark of the shrub, bespoke, my mother gave herself over to being petition, beseeching all goodwill, as she has always done. If a stitch is a loop, then my mother is prayer. Blessing, forgiveness, thanksgiving, petition, embodied in her every action. It snowed that Easter, and my Coreopsis ensemble awakened in me in early spring. And I forgot to tell you that Coreopsis is this plant that comes from Asia, and it's yellow, but it's a very pale yellow. So that's what my outfit was. All right. One more for the mom. I grew up in Gary until I was 12, Gary, Indiana. And then we moved to a town to the east, about 45 minutes, Valparaiso. So this poem was, there was a village shopping center. And I wanted to specifically mention this because like here, like we think of village as something entirely different. And this was just a shopping center in the Glen Park neighborhood where I lived in Gary. So it was a lot more urban than what we think of as a village. Strawberries for my mother. Here, 1,000 miles away, losing you frightens me, like the time I was 7, lost in pennies at the village shopping center, blinded by a sea of winter coats, adrift, calling for you. Each day I forgive myself a little more for what I've not given, knowing what you wanted from me, that you love me. That should have been enough. I want to brush your hair and bring you strawberries. Definite tone change here. So the book where I got, the anthology where I got a couple, 4 poems accepted, the Saving Ourselves, is being published by a publisher called Wild Side, and the I's are not I's, they're Y's, so it's WYLDSYDE. They're out of Long Island, New York, and it's an interesting project. It's sort of like a vanity press in the sense that they're self-publishing. But what I like about it is that they're donating money to a UN fund for women. So everybody that buys the book, money will go to this fund for women, and I think that's really, wonderful. So I submitted 4 poems, and I'm going to read just a couple. And this one is kind of, this is the most unfinished in my project here. I didn't really sculpt it. So I had this weird experience a couple years ago when my dog was still alive, my last dog. He was a black lab mix, and we used to walk on a trail every day. And I had this memory come back to me. So the poem's about memory, and about this woman that I knew when I was in college. I met her my freshman year, and this incident happened when we were juniors, and I had been working on the school newspaper. So I mentioned that in there, the Indiana Daily Student, because I went to IU. And I hadn't been thinking about her at all. But when I took this walk, something happened, and I thought of her. And I don't know, even like now, I can't quite understand like why this memory came back to me. And then I went home, and I checked when her birthday was and when the anniversary of her death was, because it's a cold case. She's been gone 48 years. And it was like her birthday was just going to be in like, the anniversary of her birthday was going to be in a few days, and I hadn't been thinking about her. I have this little article that I wrote for the student newspaper, but I hadn't looked at it in a while. So I still haven't figured it out. I called it interrogatives because I was trying to find a hook to write the poem on. And so interrogatives in English are who, what, where, why, all those words, right? And that's where it is now, but I don't think it's going to stay there. But it's a little long, so I didn't have time to rework it. And so it has to go back to the workshop. But it's still an interesting poem. Corn on the river's trail is 7 foot, tunneling a path for my old lab, scuffing his paws and I to walk. Why today, blue sky Vermont day, do I remember? How, when I get home, I discover it's 3 days before her birthday. Anne, who lived next to me in the dorm freshman year. How she startled me one night after dinner as I passed her room, the door half open because she was with a guy. Why she lashed out at him sitting on the bed, rehearsal, she smiles, a theater class assignment. What brilliance, I smile back. At the dip in the trail, I meet a man with a cairn terrier. Hiya, we say, passing. Walk here often, he says. Oh, yes, a lot, I say brightly as we go on our way. But then, as I near the trail's end, why does a darkness in me awaken from dormancy, reaching through the years, pricking me? Look back. When I look over my shoulder, I see he hasn't continued on his way. Instead, he's turned around, coming toward me. How the darkness is now a memory aroused, a violent summer storm discharging. How she vanishes 30 miles from school. A car breaks down, locks the doors to the rust-colored Pontiac Le Mans, walks to get help. How in an Indiana cornfield, someone who we may never know ties her arms together with one shoelace, assaults her, meaning in Old French from the 14th century, he sprang on her in surprise. He leapt on her, he battered her, meaning he trampled her. After how he finishes. With the other string, he fashions a garrote, lassos her throat, twisting the lace with her hairbrush. We were only 20. Why was I lucky the summer before, returning to campus when my car broke down and a cop helped? How, 5 weeks later on a radiant October day, not unlike today, the farmer finds Anne as he harvests the corn. Where at home, I read again the small article I wrote for the student newspaper, attempting to give homage to her. Why, 19 days before the 45th anniversary of her death, this weighted remembrance comes to me out of the blue. What to do but breathe her memory in fully, say her name, Anne Harmeyer, Anne Louise Harmeyer. And this is another one that is going to be in the Saving Ourselves anthology.
Finish after that one, is that okay?
Ooh, I have so many poems. Is it really a half hour?
I think we started at around 20 past.
Okay. I want to read something happy. Can I read 2 more?
Yep.
After this one?
2 more.
Okay. All right, this one's called Leash. I kenneled the dog, traveled all day to get to the funeral. My sister had taken pictures of her flaxen-haired Stephen in his little casket, but the film jammed in the camera. A newspaper reporter, I knew cameras, so of course I wanted to help. Her unspooled grief could have swallowed us up. On the way to the camera store, my sister's husband stopped at a park. Trees, a woods maybe, a stream. Was there a stream? He uncoiled his tongue down my throat. As Stephen got off the bus, his little girlfriend called from across the road. He loved her and playing pirates. A white pickup struck him. Each parent thought Stephen was with the other. Another sister said his father did it to her, too. On the edge of that ravine, he pushed away brokenness, moved closer to show how I could use my dog's leash, pull him near to protect me from danger. All right, I'll just read 2 more, and they're a little more light. Hang on here. The Swimmer. The Swimmer. This is another poem about hunger, but it's not literal hunger. That night after the basketball game, you drove your dad's 73 Mercury Marquis parking lot on the far side of town. On the radio, Frankie Avalon crooned, "My eyes adored you." You quieted the music and began the unfastening, opening me. I didn't know I could say no. I didn't want to say no. Breasts against breasts, nipples hardening in heat that winter night. Your wet mouth, hungry, lean desire. Up and up I swam into your tenderness, aching, the stars above lost to steamed windows. All right, last poem. This is kind of about Amelia Earhart. It's in her voice, and there's an epigraph. It says, like previous flights, I am undertaking this one solely because I want to, and because I feel that women now and then have to do things to show what women can do. And I saw this at the National Archives in Washington, D.C. It's dated Amelia Earhart, November 10th, 1936. Soaring. They called me crazy woman driver, hot-headed broad, said I didn't listen to my navigator, did just the opposite of what he said. They saw what they wanted, not pilot, gritty, dogged, testing the limits with riveting curiosity, risking failure to be true to myself because I wanted to live in possibility, ascending. Thank you.